The Chicago Bulls were a really pleasant surprise last season. The United Center, which has pretty much laid dormant since basically the Jordan era, outside of a brief stint with Derrick Rose, was finally reignited. But at 42 and a half wins, it appears that the betting world isn't really taking them seriously. And the reason for that has to be that the Chicago Bulls deficiencies were on full display come playoff time up against a true finals contender in the Milwaukee Bucks. The Chicago Bulls saw firsthand just how far away they were from being considered a true contender. But if you're a Bulls fan, it was still a season to be proud of. Looking forward to next season, it might be tempting to take the over, considering this Bulls group was just completely crippled by injuries in the second half of last year, but I would still lean towards taking the under. They struggled mightily against the top teams in the East, going just 1-14 during the regular season versus the top four seeds in the Eastern Conference. And this year, those top four seeds were at least able to remain around the same level they were or have improved slightly, at least on paper. And a few of those teams that finished below the Bulls in the standings that will be kind of competing for playoff spots have made some huge improvements this offseason. Almost across the board, the East has improved. And while the Bulls did make some big name acquisitions, it remains to be seen how much of an improvement they will provide. And with some big question marks from the returning roster, I think this team is destined to take a step back this season. Of the players who were actually somewhat regular members of the rotation, the Bulls basically only lost Tristan Thompson and Troy Brown, so not a big deal. They're able to replace those guys with Goran Dragic and Andre Drummond. And so, sure, on paper, improvements were made. However, they strike me as marginal improvements at best. The Bulls already have an incredibly crowded backcourt when they're at full strength. You got Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, and now they add rookie Dalen Terry, all of whom are point guards. And then you have Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, who are also able to do some facilitation and do some of the point guard duties in a pinch. But with this roster, they're never going to have to do that. So where exactly does Goran Dragic fit in here? Because unless you're going to go three small guards at a time, I just don't see how everyone is getting playing time here. The other big addition was Andre Drummond, which no doubt fills a need and is a huge upgrade over Tristan Thompson in that backup center spot. But come playoff time, when you have to guard guys like Joel Embiid and Giannis and that Cavs front line, if the plan is to guard them with a combination of Andre Drummond and Nikola Vucevic, you're going to be in for a really, really rough time. Even with big wings like Kevin Durant and Jason Tatum, the Bulls just don't really have an answer for that. So all of the potential top teams out east, the Bulls just don't really have an answer for. And I already mentioned the lack of big man depth, but they also have a depth issue on the wing. Sure, you have DeRozan and LaVine, but neither of them are going to take on that Jimmy Butler, Jason Tatum, Kevin Durant matchup that you're inevitably going to have to face in the playoffs. Also, neither of those guys are really equipped or well suited to play that stretch four spot. So that leaves relatively unproven Patrick Williams, who, if he develops, could fill that spot. That leaves 6'5" Javonte Green and a smattering of whatever Derrick Jones Jr. can give you at this stage. That has to really scare you, that wing rotation, if you're a Bulls fan. And granted, that's come playoff time. So, what about concerns for the regular season? Well, I have two really big ones with returning players from this roster as far as taking the over, and that's with DeMar DeRozan and Lonzo Ball. DeRozan had one of the best seasons of his career last season, if not the best season, which is pretty much unheard of for a player entering his mid 30s. That seems like more of the outlier to me, considering the surrounding years. It was way beyond what he had done like the last few years. So I highly doubt entering his 14th season, he's all of a sudden going to be a perennial MVP candidate and all NBA guy. Next up is Lonzo Ball, who filled a lot of really important roles for this team last season. Lonzo was undoubtedly the team's best defender, likely their best passer, or at least a very important connective playmaker, and was a great floor spacer. Lonzo just had another knee procedure that's going to sideline him for the beginning of the season and likely longer. And on the surface, this may not seem like a very big deal, but the problem is this is normally that something that he would have recovered from by like March or April. And he's been pretty injury prone throughout his career so far. So if he just can't stay on the court or this knee thing becomes a career altering type thing, it's going to really affect the ceiling of this team. So that's just way too many question marks for me to take an over on this Bulls team. It was a fun story last year, but the way that things are kind of shaping up on this roster, it looks more like a one-hit wonder than a contender year after year. Look for the Bulls to be in the play-in this year, and if they manage to get out of the play-in tournament, look for them to get curb stomped again in the first round.